So, Helen and I are here just seen the cast and crew screening of the film Mary Magdalene at the Curzon in Soho, and you can hear the hubbub behind us of various people hanging out and having something to drink after seeing the film. So Mary Magdalene as a film is something that I've been happy to advise on, but you never know what they're going to pick up in terms of your advice. And it's great to have seen it with Helen, who has seen it for the first time and didn't really have any kind of preconceptions about it, did you, Helen?
I really didn't know what to expect, actually, a film just called Mary Magdalene, but I found it really moving. I thought it was really well done, actually. Right from the start, I was completely engrossed by the whole thing. There's something about the person who plays Mary, too. I think she's beautiful, but at the same time, there's something very thoughtful and sort of almost otherworldly about her.
Rooney Mara, a brilliant actress.
Yeah, she's way away from that kind of prostitute, very kind of, earthy kind of person. There's something completely believable about her in this role. And I think what the film really does well is that whole idea about the differences between the sexes in the first century.
Yeah.
Men and women were different. Men couldn't just go into a female environment in the same way that women couldn't just go into a female environment. And it sort of explores that whole thing about how difficult it was for women to come forward for baptism when it's this all-male public group.
Yeah. It's seeing things from a woman's point of view. It reorients the whole story, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's not really trying to give you a gospel story. It's trying to give you a story that wasn't actually recorded in the Gospels, which I like, a possibility of an alternative history.
That's right, and it's actually a lot of the gospel stuff isn't there because Mary isn't seeing it, so she's not seeing the whole trial scenes, and there's large sections not there, but you just see things through Mary's eyes.
Yeah.
And I think another thing it does really well is the whole idea about demon possession in the ancient world.
Wow, scary. Exorcism is robust and scary, and
exactly.
And it didn't know what was going on.
And again, from the male point of view, she's crazy. She must be possessed because she doesn't want to get married, and that's her only crime. And yet, it is considered possession, and the fact that her interests are just really different. She's this very spiritual person. She's very interested in God, and in a way, she has this natural connection with Jesus. But on that level,
she's strange spiritual.
She's strange.
She doesn't quite fit in with normal spirituality as they understand it at that time. And she's also alienated and depressed and feeling very alone. And I think that sort of idea that Jesus came for the lost sheep. She's a lost sheep. And so we get that perspective. It's not all about institution. It's about people who are feeling not accepted by institutions. So she stands for all those people, more than just women as well. So I really like that they brought that up. What did you think of the portrayal of Jesus? Joaquin Phoenix as Jesus.
There was something a little bit lackluster about him, but in a way, I think you've got to have that because the spotlight is so much on Mary. In a way, you don't want another ultra charismatic figure.
It's really interesting because I thought he was amazingly charismatic.
Really?
Yeah, I would put him right up there as my best Jesus.
Really?
Yes.
I'm amazed.
Yeah, my best Jesus previously was Jesus Christ Superstar. Yes, really. But actually, I really like the way he seemed to really channel a deep spirituality and a deep power. You really felt like, yes, this guy can raise the dead. This guy can do something extraordinary.
I believed he could raise the dead. Yeah, that's for sure. That was a very powerful scene where I assume it was Lazarus. Was it? You didn't actually get to know. Yeah.
But like one of the many unrecorded raisings of the dead.
That's right. Yeah.
And while we have the story of Lazarus in the Gospel of John, the story we're told of Jesus is that he did many things that weren't actually recorded in the Gospels. So this is a sort of the story that wasn't told, that sort of space that the writers have tried to inhabit, the untold.
I felt a bit as though and again, I think this is the spotlight on Mary. You know, she had to sort of keep him going. She had to bolster him. And that doesn't necessarily detract from anything in him, but I suppose for me, yeah, he wasn't this sort of standalone charismatic character. He needed Mary
But
in
I
a way that he
love
didn't.
that.
Oh yeah, I liked it.
Yeah,
I liked it.
yeah,
But I
okay,
think
great.
it does. In some way, it for me, it sort of detracted from Jesus, and I'm not saying that was necessarily a bad thing, but it's a very different Jesus to the one we're used to thinking about. You know, that charismatic genius entirely alone.
Yeah.
You know, sort of standing head and shoulders above this sort of the throng of everybody
Yes,
else. This is a much more vulnerable Jesus, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But he needs Mary in a way. He needs her to keep him going.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how people respond to that, isn't it? It could really strike chords, but it might really alienate some people. Some people might feel, this is not my Jesus, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And could feel quite upset about the film. I mean, you know, I could sort of list about 10 points that are going to make people upset about the
At
film.
least.
Why do you think people should go and see it?
I think because it does a brilliant job of telling Mary's story. I'm not necessarily sure that it's all accurate. Who knows? But it really opens up a way of seeing how Mary and probably other women like her. I mean, you know, one of the troubles is we just have Mary, and we know that there were lots of other women around Jesus as
There's
well.
no Joanna.
There's no exactly.
There's no Salome. There's
Susanna.
Susanna.
Yeah, that's right.
Or they might be there in the sort of group of women at the end that sort of really come on board, but it's Mary Magdalene who is the prime apostle.
But it shines that light on women's experience, which the Gospels, for many different reasons, are very interested in the story of Jesus and the story of male disciples, and it's that very much a sort of a male public story. And I think women tend to get sidelined in all of that. And yet we know as historians that, of course, women were there. Women were coming to the group. And what were the practicalities of all of that? Who was going to the women? It couldn't have been Jesus going into women's houses and homes.
Not too often.
Not to women he didn't know.
Well, unless they were sort of major situations, like, for example, a healing or something like that, but not normally, because it's a very gendered society. Men did this thing and women did other things, and I like in the film they really showed that, you know, women on one side of the synagogue, men on the other side of the synagogue, the women's jobs, and the real problem about even having Mary on the road, that, you know, Peter's saying, well, you know, how are we going to look when we've got her on the road with us? This is really going to be an issue.
And that whole thing about modesty, women covering their heads, not really because there's sort of commands or anything, but just simply because that's the society in which they live, and the women are modest. When a man comes past, you know, they naturally sort of hide themselves. And I thought it did all of those things really well. It really showed how different that society is to our own.
And what did you feel emotionally about the film?
Oh, emotion. Well, I started crying right from the start.
Yeah, me too. You know, it's amazing because I've read the script, I commented on the script, I wanted a few things out of the script and a few things in the script, and I looked at the edit, one of the first edits, and commented on that, and I thought, oh, this is quite an emotional film. But this time round, it was like, first scene, tears pouring down my face, all the way through. I found it incredibly emotional.
I think, you know, the great thing is that Mary gets it from the start. She understands Jesus' message in a way that the disciples don't. I think for me one slight difficulty is the portrayal of the disciples. I mean, there's good gospel precedent for the disciples not understanding, being competitive, and you know, that thinking it's all about nationalism and establishing the kingdom. That's certainly a strand that's there, but
the male disciples are just so blocked out.
They are.
You really just feel like taking them and saying, excuse me, are you actually listening to anything
That's right.
that Jesus is saying? And while we have that motif of the slightly blocked out male disciples in the Gospel of Mark, the film really takes that to an extreme, doesn't it?
And they never get it. I mean, even at the end, when Mary comes back, and we probably shouldn't give away too much of the ending, but you get the impression that but they still need their heads knocking together, that they're not quite getting it.
Whereas we know that in the early church there's a great respect for the women disciples very early on, and it's only gradually the women disciples get more and more marginalised in the church. It doesn't happen from day one. They're recognising the importance of Mary Magdalene, or we wouldn't have the Gospel of John.
Exactly, that's right. She is there right at the beginning. But I like the way it had on the screen at the end, it says, Pope Gregory the Great in whenever it was, 591, declared her to be a prostitute. And then some other things on the screen telling you about how she's been sort of rehabilitated by the Vatican since then. So, I mean, there is nothing in the film, I think, is not based on something, some text, some claim or counterclaim from the ancient world. It's just somehow when you put it all together, it can be quite striking because you realise the full implications of some of these things.
So it's a beautiful film, beautiful music, very spiritual, emotional. It takes you on quite a journey. So I hope lots of people will go and see it and talk about it. And I really wish this film well. I feel like they've done a good job in just taking on such a controversial subject and running with it and doing something quite special, I feel.
And I hope people go and see it for themselves. I hope people don't just hear stories that it's scandalous, it's moving away from the Gospels, and think, well, I'm not going to go and support that, because I think it's been done in a genuinely positive manner. I don't think anyone's trying to be negative to the church or to the Gospels or Christianity. It's just an alternative view seen through the eyes of Mary, and I do hope people go and see it and think for themselves about it.
Great, me too, and it goes really well with our documentary on the women disciples of Jesus coming out on Channel 4 around Easter time, so I hope everyone watches our documentary. Helen Bond and Joan Taylor signing out. Bye.